Welcome to First Fridays with the FBI. I'm your host, Monica Tucker, and I know it's been a minute since we've been live, but this is an important show, and I'm going to introduce our guest today, FBI El Paso Special Agent Will Perrin. Hold
Hello.
on, I got to make sure they can see you.
All right.
Hello, welcome to First Fridays with the FBI.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Like you said, this is an important thing with all we have going on with the election. So, thank you for having us so we can discuss this important issue.
Thank you. And before we get started, some of our viewers and listeners like to know a little bit about some of the FBI agents. We let them know they're real people, just like us. So,
Sure.
can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Been with the FBI for about the last 8 years, all in El Paso. I've been working as the election crimes coordinator for our office for about the last 5 years. I grew up in the desert Southwest, about 4 or 5 hours from El Paso. So very familiar with this region and the folks that typically live out here, the family values and stuff that we all usually see out here. And yeah, we're here in El Paso and we like this community. So
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And we're talking about an important topic today because it's that season, election time. So tell us, what are the biggest threats to America's? No, I'm sorry. I'm going to start over. What has the FBI done to prepare for the upcoming elections?
okay, well, we have the FBI has a 2024 election security plan, and it includes a programmatic coordination between a bunch of our divisions that work different violations. And we combine our operations and intelligence efforts, and we combat that broad range of threats to the U.S. elections. And some of the divisions that are involved are the criminal investigative, cyber, counterintelligence, and counterterrorism. And so we all work together in this space to ensure that whatever that threat is, we can appropriately work on that and mitigate it.
Okay, and I'm gonna go back
Sure.
to that first one.
Yeah.
So what are the biggest threats to America's 2024 elections?
Right. Well, I gave you based on the divisions that we have working on this. We have in the election space, there are ever evolving threats from those who would seek to undermine our elections, and some of those things would include like malicious cyber activity against election infrastructure, foreign malign influence operations, your historical election-related crimes, and then even threats of violence surrounding the elections. And we can get into more of that later.
Okay.
Also, there's talking about the cyber aspect of it. It's not always cyber attacks from nation states that we have to consider. There are criminal hacktivists and activists that would target election infrastructure either for financial gain or just political reasons. So those are all things that we'll have to look at and try to stay ahead of when we work in this space.
Okay, and I think just some of us didn't realize that it was a big deal, but I'm glad you're here to shed some light on it.
Sure.
So, what falls under election crimes? Like, just from what I've seen, when it comes to like, can you provide some examples?
Sure. So historically, like I said, elections are ever changing, right? And the threats that we face, but your historical election related crimes fall into three categories. There are the campaign finance crimes, voter and ballot fraud, and then there's civil rights violations surrounding the election because it is a constitutionally protected activity.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about campaign finance crimes, those are all governed by the Federal Election Campaign Act. It's also known as FECA. That act grants exclusive federal criminal jurisdiction to the FBI, and then for administrative matters to the Federal Election Commission. To describe FECA, it basically governs how the sources and the amounts of campaign donations, and then just requires appropriate disclosures of campaign funds and activities throughout the election process. Okay, and so that's something that is historically under election crimes that we would look into. Also, there's the voter and the ballot fraud, and that's what a lot of people think of when they think of elections or something the FBI would look into. And I'll give you some examples of that to help folks understand what all that entails. Okay, so if a voter intentionally gives false information when voting or registering to vote, That's an example of that. If an ineligible person tries to vote in a federal election, that could be a federal crime, and that would think of like non-citizens or some convicted felons. You know, if you're prohibited from voting in a federal election, you shouldn't try to do that. If an individual tries to vote more than once in a federal election, that's a federal crime. If any election official uses their position inappropriately to try to affect an election, that would be something we would look at. And then finally, bribes surrounding the voting process. If there's a voter who, is offered something or receives something of value in exchange for a specific vote, that would be something that we'd look into for the voter and ballot fraud. And then lastly, there's civil rights, okay? And civil rights is an important one. That would include like voter suppression or voter intimidation attempts, trying to get a person or a group of people to not exercise their right. And you can think of some of those themes. If information goes out that would, misinformation to change the time, place, or manner of an election to try to get people to not vote, that would be a suppression or an intimidation thing we would look at. Also, if there is, threats of physical harm or economic harm towards voters to try to prevent them from voting, that's also something that falls under a civil rights violation we would look into.
Okay. Wow. So when does the FBI have a jurisdiction when it comes to investigating election crimes?
Yep, great question. So in general, it is the individual state's job to administer a fair and free election, okay? However, the FBI plays an important role in protecting federal interests in those elections, and preventing violations of Americans' constitutional rights. Yeah. So to give you an idea, I'll name some of these off, but these are specific instances that would give the FBI jurisdiction in an election, okay? If there's a ballot that includes one or more federal candidates or federal measures, that gives the FBI jurisdiction. If there's an alleged crime involving official misconduct by an election official, alleged activity pertaining to fraudulent voter registration. Again, I mentioned ineligible persons voting in a federal election, going back to like your non-citizens or ineligible convicted felons, right? Interstate facilities that are used to violate state election laws is something that gives the feds and the FBI the ability to look into that. And then lastly, if there's activity involving federal campaign finance laws, which we talked about a little bit earlier, those are generally what gives the FBI and the federal government the ability to look into a crime during an election.
Okay.
Yeah, potential crime, right?
So what does the FBI not investigate?
Now, this is probably just as important as what we do investigate, right? And having folks understand. So let me go through some of these things and help clear up some confusion about what we can and cannot do, okay? So the FBI does not investigate voter facilitation activities. And what that means, if somebody's offered a ride to go vote, if they're offered time off from work to go vote, or even if getting a stamp, from somebody like to use an absentee ballot, those are not things that the FBI is going to look into, okay? So in general, violations of state campaign finance law, we don't look into. There are some nuances and exceptions to that if there's other federal statutes that are violated, but in general, we don't look at the state campaign stuff, okay? Now, if this one we get questions about all the time, if campaigns or candidates are distributing inaccurate campaign literature or making false claims about themselves or an opponent, we do not get into that. That's like the political aspect of elections, and we don't delve into that. If individuals are campaigning too close to the polls, that is a state issue, and that's up to the state and local authorities to deal with. So the FBI does not get involved in that, okay? If a candidate, going back to the political part, if a candidate's trying to convince one of their opponents to withdraw from a race, we're not going to get involved. We're not going to look at that, okay? That's like part of the whole campaigning stuff, right? Now, this is an important one. Honest mistakes by polling place workers, everybody's aware of potential wrongdoing, but in cases of honest mistakes, we're not going to look at that. People should keep in mind that most of our polling workers are volunteers, oftentimes students, oftentimes retirees. They're just trying to do the best they can and help out. And so, honest mistakes are not something that we're interested in. Okay. And then lastly, and maybe most importantly, is, once the elections are ongoing, folks want to know the results of the races, right, and the elections, and getting involved because the results aren't coming out, fast enough, or aren't being announced. That's not something the FBI is going to get involved. We let the state administer that election. We let them go through their processes, and ultimately just let them do their job, without us interfering. So we're not going to get involved in any of that.
Okay. So as you can hear, they're not going to get involved in what we probably consider the little stuff. So, okay. So, well, can the FBI personnel be like live and active at election poll sites?
Right. So just like every other eligible American, the FBI agents have the right to vote, right? So agents and personnel from any part of the federal government can show up to vote. Okay. So you might have a family member, a neighbor that you recognize, you've seen them at the polls, they're probably just voting. We can do that. Now, on the other hand, in conjunction with our work and our official duties, federal employees can't be posted at the polling centers and where votes are taking place. Okay, that's a state and local issue. So, like I said, in conjunction with our work, we will not be there. We won't be at the polls, and we won't respond to the polls. Okay, that's a state issue, and we let our state partners do their job.
Okay. So, does the FBI investigate threats to election workers?
Yes. So, as a result of some of the things that we saw during and after the 2020 election, threats of violence, those instances increased dramatically. In response to that, in 2021, the Department of Justice, in conjunction with the FBI, we created an election threats task force. And the purpose of that is to identify, investigate, and mitigate threats targeting election workers, right? Preventing those folks from doing their jobs. So when, in the event that the FBI gets information involving a potential threat, we work with the DOJ and, work together to get a determination on whether it's something that we can look at federally. Threats can be conveyed in a number of ways, online, in person, over the phone. And so there's some nuance to how the federal government can get involved. But even in the instances where the FBI can't get involved, we work very closely with our state and local partners, make sure they have that information, and so that we all work together to make sure that, real threats are taken care of and worked.
Okay. Well, I obviously have 50 million other questions, but I'm not going to give you all those. But
Okay.
I will ask this because I've seen it on social media, and I don't think that I've ever done it before.
Okay.
But what about people who post like the wrong dates for people to, whether it's early voting or the actual voting date? What if they post the wrong date to get people not to, go to the polls?
Right. No, that's a great question. Kind of hit on it earlier, but unfortunately, some of that activity may fall under some of the civil rights things that we look at. Okay. So anybody who is trying to persuade somebody or, convince them that the time, place, or manner of an election or a vote is different than what it actually is, that's something that the FBI would look into, right? Everybody has that constitutional right to vote. And so trying to prevent somebody from doing that by giving false information, when it's a serious thing, that's potentially something we would look into. Keep in mind that I know that memes go out and on social media, people joke about that. But, as we get closer to the election time and everything, that's definitely not something to joke about. We take it very serious because, it can be, even if joking, it could be misconstrued as an honest attempt to suppress an individual or a group's right to vote. And we just don't want to do that. We want to steer clear of that, even though some of those things are funny, we've got to take them serious and not try to put out any false information.
Right. That's So people, if I've ever done that or shared a meme, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I could. It was a crime. Okay. But so when it comes to the elections, protecting the elections from foreign and meddling information. What is
Right.
the FBI doing about that?
Okay, so you're in the fall of 2017, the FBI established the Foreign Influence Task Force. And the purpose of that is to identify and counteract foreign malign influence operations targeting the United States. Okay. Um, Putting out, we talked about with candidates and everything, putting out misinformation in general is not a crime, and it's not something that we would look into. But when it comes from a foreign source, and it's like a foreign attempt to affect an election, that's definitely something the FBI would look into. That Foreign Influence Task Force is made up of a number of our partners, and when that information comes to light, we work to see what the source of the misinformation is, and if it's foreign, we definitely work to mitigate and correct that, so that the American people aren't being persuaded by a foreign power or something trying to meddle in our elections.
Okay. So, and my next question, what is the threat posed by deep fakes? And that's a whole other topic in itself,
Wow,
but
yes.
when it comes to the election.
Great question. So the deep fakes, that's like something we've seen. It's ever evolving. Technology is getting better daily, and the real concern with that is if it is like coming from a foreign source. Again, misinformation in general is not a crime, but it's all about the source, and the deep fakes are getting so good that it's getting hard to detect what's real and what's not. So we're definitely cognizant of that, and we're working with all of our partners in the election space and the intelligence community and even the private sector to get ahead of that issue, to try to understand it and mitigate it the best we can. But it's something that it's only going to grow as an issue, and we're going to have to work hard to try to stay ahead of that. Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to those deep fakes and the memes with false information, does the FBI ask social media companies to take them down or block them?
No. We don't request or expect the social media companies to do anything like that or take a particular action on our behalf. In general, the social media companies can provide information to us if they choose so, and they, following all applicable rules and laws, they can absolutely give information to us.
Right.
And in most instances, the social media companies have their own teams that look at those sorts of activities. And if there are users that violate their own internal user agreement policies, the social media companies can choose to take those down if applicable, but we don't ask them to do that. And so that's something we don't do. But if they can definitely share information that they see, if they think it's appropriate to share it with us or any of the other partners that we work with in the space.
Okay. So now, how does the FBI balance the need for thorough investigations with respecting individuals' rights and privacy during, inquiries related to election fraud?
Yeah, sure. So our mission at the FBI is to protect American people and uphold the Constitution, right? And so that right to vote is in the Constitution. So we want everybody to, if they choose to do so, have that right. But we also take election-related allegations seriously, and so if it's something warranted and it invokes one of those things we talked about that we'd have jurisdiction, we'll look into it. However, there are a lot of rules and policies that guide how we do that, so that we do it in a way that is the least intrusive, and it's always done in a way that it's private. We don't talk about those things that we look into, because oftentimes we receive information that's not accurate, and we would never want to jeopardize somebody's reputation because of something we're doing in good faith. So people should be able to know that we don't care about who they vote for, what their political views are, any of their information, anything like that. That's never a consideration for something we would look into. We definitely don't look into anything that's First Amendment protected. We would never do that. However, if it is a potential election crime, we will follow the policies that we always have that govern what we do, and we'll do so in a manner that's professional and thorough. And we'll find out what we have and go from there. In consultation with the Department of Justice, we never do that in a vacuum. We work with our partners to make sure we're doing it the right way. So.
Okay. So where can we, because I am a concerned citizen, where can we
Sure.
find out, more about, and or report election crimes?
Sure. So because we talked about the threats of violence or potential threats of violence we might see, we hope we don't, but we might. If there's any act of violence or imminent act of violence, the only appropriate thing is to call 911 first, okay? So an emergency situation, that's our course of action, 911, guys. However, if it's something else that we've talked about that's not, your typical election-related crime, we definitely encourage folks to report something if they think it's not right. And there's a couple of ways that they can do that. They can call their local field office. So for FBI El Paso, I can give you the number, 915-832-5000. Okay. People that don't like to talk to anybody on the phone, they can do that online also, right? And that's at our tips.fbi.gov. Okay. And then there's a hotline that anybody can call, and it's 1-800-CALL-FBI. And if folks are unsure of where their field office is or something like that, you can call any FBI office, provide that information, and depending on where they're at, we'll get it to the right place. So don't have a fear about calling the wrong office or something like that. We'll take that information if appropriate, and we'll get it to where it needs to go. Okay.
Okay. Well, great. I appreciate you coming on to
Happy to do so.
Because this is an important topic. Again, it's election season, so I hope everyone's listening can understand what's happening and don't share memes that tell a lie to avoid the crime. But before you go, I do ask every FBI agent that we talk to a little bit about themselves. So
Okay.
for El Paso,
Sure.
since you're here in El Paso, tell us if there's a place or somewhere you'd like to go or you think everyone should visit before they leave El Paso.
Oh, that's a great question. There's lots of places. The local food is unique and great, and everybody should come to El Paso to experience that, especially the Mexican and the Hispanic influenced food. The weather's great, so coming here to experience any of the things we have here is always a good idea. Maybe avoid June through August, but outside of that, the weather is great in El Paso. And just know too that anything you do here, the people are friendly. This is a big city, but it's also a place that has that small town feel. People are still friendly. They say thanks when you hold the door. They'll hold the door for you. And so just all those things combined, this is a good place to visit and do anything within the community. So it's been good to me, my family and I, since we've been here, and people should visit and take advantage of those things.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
I'm happy. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you for sharing this information with us, and hopefully everyone will take heed. Thank you.